Everyone. Here is our video for Monday. I think it's October or Tuesday, November 1st. And for our quiz, of course, our learning today is in dedication to the fair treatment and speedy release of our Israeli hostages. And our focus of our class today is where the Talmud actually speaks about hostage release or redemption of hostages. And in Hebrew, that's called Peedyon Sheh-voo-eem. And we'll see that in a moment. Peedyon Sheh-voo-eem. First of all, we have two places in the Talmud that speaks about. Now, let me say this for right away. This isn't like I happen to know this off the top of my head. I listened to a webinar who told me about these sources, told me a little bit about them and where to find them. And then I kind of put this together for you. So please don't think that that Rabbi Light has such an amazing grasp of Talmud that once I know that a topic of the moment is redeeming captives, I can kind of find you that piece. No, I'm using my help along the way. Okay, but we have two stories. One is more of an agadah, and one is more of a halachic kind of questioning about Peedyon Sheh-voo-eem, about redemption of captives. The first one is a piece of agadah coming from both of these places are in Masechet Gittin in Seder Nashim. Gittin, a get is a bill of divorce that a man gives a woman and for divorce, and that's why it's in Gittin. For some reason, Peedyon Sheh-voo-eem, or these laws, are in there. So first of all, our story goes like this, and we start with some words that we know: Tanu Rabbanan, which means our rabbis taught in a Baraita, right? These words we've seen before, Tanu Rabbanan. We know that a Baraita is coming next, although what's weird is this, we see the word Ma'aseh, which we saw actually with our two Edim, Ma'aseh. So a once upon a time kind of story is coming, and here it is. Once upon a time, Rabbi Yoshua, right? We've seen Rabbi Yoshua just now. Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananiah went to the great city of Rome. So Jerusalem was destroyed. Rome, what I guess Yavne was already established, but for some reason Yoshua went there maybe to do some dealings with the Romans or something like that. He once went to the great city of Rome, where they said to him, "There is a child in prison with beautiful eyes and an attractive appearance. His curly hair is arranged in locks." Rabbi Yoshua went and stood by the entrance to the prison. He said the first part of a verse of the Bible from Isaiah, as if speaking to himself: "Who gave Jacob for a spoil and Israel for the robbers?" And the child, amazingly, Rabbi Yoshua hears the child say the second half of the verse. The child knows Torah so well, knows the Bible so well, he knows the second half of the verse by heart. And Rabbi Yeshua is so amazed that he says, "I'm certain that if given the opportunity, this child would become a great teacher in Israel." And he says, "I'm taking an oath right now. I will not move from here until I ransom him for whatever sum of money they set for him." And it's true. He didn't move from there. He stayed in Rome until he had ransomed this boy for a great sum of money. And who was that child? This child grew up to be Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. So we see here a few things happening. One, we see that Rabbi Yoshua is willing to pay a lot of money to make sure that that a hostage is free, and that's going to be a main topic of our conversation in the Mishnah and Talmud piece that we're going to be looking at next. So here we go. Now we're also in Gittin, but now we're on Amud Mem. Nun Hey. No, yeah, Nun Hey and Amud Aleph, and this is a halachic piece, and we're going to start. So first of all, um, something that's important to know is right on the walls of our school we see the word Tikkun Olam, and interestingly enough, in chapter 4 of in the Mishnah of chapter 4 of Gittin, we actually find the word in a whole bunch. Now, I've listed all these Mishnahs for you here. Let me move myself. So chapter 4, Mishnah 2, mipnei. Mipnei means because. So because of tikkun olam, again, mipnei tikkun olam, because of tikkun olam, mipnei tikkun olam, mipnei tikkun olam, mipnei tikkun olam. All these Mishnahs to 5, mipnei tikkun olam, 6, mipnei tikkun olam, 7, mipnei tikkun olam. This entire chapter has the words mipnei tikkun olam. And by the way, it's not random that the Mishnah would be arranged in such a way that all these mipnei tikkun olams are all kind of lumped in the same thing. Because let's remember, the Mishnah was a law that before it was written down, it was memorized. And it just so happens memorization is easier when you clump together all the different laws that have to do with one subject. So we get this subject of mipnei tikkun olam, and we see it over and over and over and over again. So that's just like a neat kind of phenomenon about when you're memorizing, and we see that time and time again in the Mishnah. That when things that often we have a certain subject, but once we get a phrase that is like a kind of a set phrase, we'll see that phrase over and over and over again. We'll even go off subject in order to get all the Mishnahs, all the laws that have to do with that phrase together, because the Mishnah is it was a memorized document first and foremost. So first of all, I want to go back for a second. So if I asked you what the word tikkun olam means, I think a lot of us would say, right, what it says right here: repair the world or make the world a better place. That is kind of the modern day kind of understanding of what tikkun olam means: to fix the world. But I want to share with you, actually, and this is from from Rabbi Jane Kanarek. Actually looked at all of these Mishnahs and actually says, "I'm sorry, guys, that actually is not what the word tikkun olam actually means. It means something very different than just kind of doing acts of kindness in the world." So let's just look at this together. Rabbi Jane Kanarek understands the words tikkun olam a bit differently. She looks at these words and how they're used in the early book of Jewish law called the Mishnah, and she concludes that tikkun olam may be translated and understood as a recalibration of the world, a recognition that the world is out of balance and that legal remedies are needed, not actual remedies by us, not actually like you and I going out and doing nice things in the world, but actually legal remedies are needed in order to readjust the world to a better balance. The focus is not so much on the power of an individual to effect change, but rather on the power of law to correct systematic injustice. So in the tradition of the rabbis, tikkun olam doesn't mean an act of kindness. We have a name for the acts of kindness, and that word is chesed, which is also a TVT value. Tikkun olam means something more like using laws and policies to rebalance the things that are wrong in our society, right? It's really completely different, not completely opposite, but it's pointing to a different mechanism. It's saying it's not the individual, it's laws that need, right? So the tradition really of Tikkun Olam also focuses on changing things not just for the present, but to change things in such a systematic way that the change is for the future as well. And so she continues to write, as we pursue tikkun olam in the contemporary world, we follow the path of our ancestors when we re-examine our laws to make sure they're helping to achieve the world we want. We should ask ourselves, are our existing laws helping to end poverty, to provide universal health care, to tackle hunger? How are our laws fostering justice and equality in race, gender, and class? Does the laws that I helped pass 5 years ago to reform public school system serve to the purpose I thought it would, or do I need to rethink it again and recalibrate it for the future situation? And then she also writes her final words are, Tikkun Olam is about making changes in the very structure of how things work in our society. And so she basically says that kind of all of these different Mishnahs really are not speaking about these like individual acts of kindness, but really things that are done to kind of create better structures to how the world can work better in a more just and fair way. So just so you know, of all of these, we are going to be looking today at Masechet Gittin at chapter 4, Mishnah number 6. Mishnah number 6, right, also has the words Mipnei Tikkun Olam, but it also has these words Peedyon Sheh-voo-eem, redeeming the captives. And that's how we get the mitzvah name Peedyon Sheh-voo-eem. Peedyon Sheh-voo-eem is the mitzvah to redeem captives. All right. So here we go. So here is the Mishnah itself. The Mishnah says the following: Ein podin et hashvuyin yater al kedei demehem mipnei tikkun olam. We may not redeem captives for more than they are worth mipnei tikkun haolam. Ve'ein mavrichin et hashvuyin mipnei tikkun olam. We may not help captives escape mipnei tikkun olam. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, it's mipnei takanat hashvuim, because of some kind of ordinance for the captives. Now, okay, so first of all, one big question is, wait a second, I thought you just said tikkun olam is supposed to be a good thing, and you're telling me that I'm not allowed to redeem a captive for more than they are worth because of tikkun olam. How is that act of not redeeming a captive for more than they are worth? How is that an act of making society more just? And how is an act of not helping someone escape from captivity, if I can help them escape, how is not helping them an act of tikkun olam? I would actually think the opposite would be the case. I would think actually it would be an act of tikkun olam, yes, to pay as much as possible to get someone free, and B, to try as hard as possible to help someone escape. Now remember, tikkun olam is actually saying make laws that allow for justice to happen. Make laws that allow not just for this situation to work, but all situations to work, right? Very different than what we think tikkun olam is today. Okay, so and this is the Mishnah, and so now we're going on to our Talmud or Gemara piece. And by the way, remember, I think I have it right here. We have seen the word. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says says mipnei takanat hashvuim. So there's a phrase, do not help a certain person who's captive escape. And that is because of this idea of tikkun olam. But Rabban Gamliel says, no, that's not why we do it. It's because of a takanat hashvuim. And if we remember correctly, we had that word takanat for something before, right? If you remember correctly, it was about takanat hashavim, right? And what was that? That was, if you remember, about the beam in the house that Hillel says, you must, if you've stolen that beam, you must tear down the entire house, take that beam, and give it back to the person. That's fair. But Beit Hillel says, no. If you have stolen that beam, you'd never admit it if you thought you had to take down the house and destroy your house in order to give it back. You just have to give the money back from that because of a takanat hashavim. I'm making an ordinance to allow to make it easier for tshuva to happen. And so if we say I'm making an ordinance to make tshuva, or saying I'm sorry, easy to happen. Here, what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel must be saying is, I'm making an ordinance to make it easier for the shvu'im, for the ones who are captive. The plural, the ones who are captive. So we're going to see what that means in a little bit. So let's go right to our Talmud. And as you see here on this page, you'll notice that this is the page of Talmud it comes from. Here is the Mishnah that we just looked at with these words matnitin. It's a abbreviation for matnitin, or our Mishnah. And here's the Talmud piece, and it starts with Gemara. So here's the Gemara right here. Again, we interchange. So often we call this whole thing the Talmud, and we say the Talmud is made up of the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Gemara is basically the kind of talking about the Mishnah and what it means and stuff like that. So here's our full piece. And there we've divided it up into the Mishnah part and the Gemara part of the Talmud, and we can call this all together the Talmud, right? Or we can just call this the Talmud as well. So it's a little confusing, I know. All right, but okay. So here we go. So here is that piece. Here is this part right here, because we just went over the Mishnah. Here's this part just in green, and I've kind of broken it up to make it easier. But I'm going to do something else right now. Is I'm going to actually. Okay, where is it? Okay. So if you look at the things I just highlighted in yellow, okay, I'll do it again. Here's not highlighted and here's highlighted. Those terms that I highlighted in yellow are actually technical terms, right? These are kind of the terms that we've been looking at. Like we saw the term last time. We saw ibait ema. We saw the word mai okimta. We see the terms tnu rabanan, right? Those terms tell us about the structure of what's to come. Okay, and here in this group here, we have one, we have two, we have three, we have four of these kind of technical terms. Actually, I'm going to say we have three because this isn't really a technical term, and I'll explain why. So, but we can, and we also know, I will also tell you that in the middle of this, we're kind of learning where the Talmud is asking questions about the Mishnah. So we can actually put our Mishnah piece in. And here we have actually um, an outline. We have the first words ibaye lahu, then we have part of the Mishnah, then we have the words odioma, then we have the word tashma, then we have another part of the Mishnah, and we say my benaihu, ika benaihu. Of course, you have no idea what those means. And I wish I brought my book with me, but if you had that book that I showed you, the kind of Frank book, or the Steinsaltz reference guide, or the Jastrow book, right? All of those books would kind of tell you what these terms mean. And that's really often the first step that a Talmud studier does, is they say, what are my technical terms? And how will those technical terms help me understand the flow of the argument? Now, you don't have those technical terms, but I'm going to tell you those technical terms, and you're required to know them at some point as well, so you might as well learn them now. So here we go. So ibaye lahu uh, means it was asked of them, or they asked. So basically, ibaye lahu introduces a problem, a halachic problem that is going to be raised about the law itself, right? And we know they're raising it and giving two possibilities because the words "o" means or, "dioma" means perhaps. So basically, we're going to say these words right here. Do they mean this? O dioma, that, right? Ibailahu. So they asked this question, right? Abaya was raised from them, right? This or that, okay? Our next term is tashma, and this is a great term. Tashma means come and hear, okay? Come and hear. And what does it actually mean, though? It means come and see, come and listen to me tell you about a Braita that is either going to support what was just one of the answers above, disprove one of the answers and thus proving the other answer correct, or something like that. So when we see the words tashma, we know we're going to see a braita that is going to in some way support or disprove one of the things that came before. So we're going to see a lot of tashmas in one of the pieces we study a little bit later on Lost and Found. Okay. So after that, we have another piece of Mishnah. So after that, kind of we have like the end of one discussion. Then we have this other piece of Mishnah. And then we have the words my benaihu, ika benaihu. And this my means what? Ika means yesh, means there is. Benaihu means what is between them, meaning this. And if you remember, in this Mishnah, we have this phrase, we may not help captives escape. And the Mishnah that has no name connected says the reason we do that is because of Tikkun Olam, the principle of Tikkun Olam. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says it's not because of Tikkun Olam, it's because of a takanat hashvu'im, something we're doing to make things easier for the captives. And so the Talmud loves to do this. Say there are two ideas, my benaihu. What is the difference between them? What is the practical, legal difference between them? Try to find me a case where one works and the other one doesn't work, because it seems like they're saying the exact same thing. But the Mishnah is saying they're not saying the same thing. So find me a case where ika benaihu. So they say my benaihu, ika benaihu. What kind of case is there between them? What is there a case, or what kind of case is there? There is a case, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. So again, once we know these phrases, it's going to help us kind of understand how our Talmud works. And here we go. Ibae lahu. it was asked of them. The words from our Mishnah, we may not redeem captives for more than they are worth because of tikkun olam. What does this mean? How is that an act of tikkun olam? How is that an act of bringing justice to the world if we're not paying money and leaving these people as hostages? Oh, okay. So there are two answers they're going to give with an odioma in between, right? Is it this? Odioma, is it that? Is it this or perhaps it's that? So here are two answers. Answer number one, we don't pay more than the person is worth, right? So it used to be that there was like a standard kind of worth, like every person is worth this amount of money, right? I don't know how they figured out that worth, but it's kind of, they're saying we don't pay we don't pay $1 million for to get someone out from being a hostage. There's a limit to how much we should pay, and this is because of tikkun olam. This is because of it is a just act of society if we do that. Why is that? Either it's because we're going to cause a financial burden on the community. Meaning what? Meaning if we say we'll pay anything for this person, who's going to pay? The community has to pay. The community needs that money maybe for other things. They can't, there has to be a limit to what they're willing to pay, right? So all of a sudden we're saying, well, maybe that is too, maybe it's, even though someone is captive, the community has to understand justice for the entire community. You can't deplete all the resources to get this person back and then have no money for the community. Okay. That's one idea that maybe it be. But they give another idea. Maybe it's because we're going to incentivize the taking of captives. If we pay so much money for someone who's a hostage, then isn't that going to make more and more people fair game to be hot? Isn't that going to make it like a very lucrative business to take hostages? So we have these two ideas, and that's why we get our tashma. Come and listen. What is this going to say? Come and listen to a Braita. Come and listen to a something that didn't get into the Mishnah, but a law that was out there that's going to help us understand which of these two possibilities are true. So what do you have to do now? Basically, once we see the Braita, we have to ask the question, what is that trying to prove? Which one is that trying to prove true, or which one is that trying to prove false? So let's go ahead and look at that Braita. Look at that with the Tashma. And here it is right here. Levi, son of Darga, paid 13,000 gold dinar, which is like a ton of money, a huge amount of money, to free his wife when she was held captive. Okay. So this is what the Talmud brings us to try to give us the proof text to tell us one of these is correct. So either the reason we don't pay money for captives is because we're afraid that it's going to make a ton of money for captives because we're afraid that it's going to incentivize more people to give, or we're afraid that it's going to cause the entire community to become totally poor because of it. Here we have a case where Levi, son of Darga, is obviously a rich person. He's not going to his community to ask them to pony up the money so he can get his wife out from being a hostage. He's paying it all himself. So the question is, which one is this telling us is true, is the real reason, and which one is the false reason? Okay? Did you figure it out? And here's our answer. The answer is that this is actually proving that the normal reason why we don't pay more for a captive is because we're going to cause a burden to the community. However, in this case, because this guy happens to be incredibly wealthy, he can go and do this because he can do this and still not cause a burden on the community. You see, if this was the answer, because we were going to incentive the taking of captives if we paid too much, then Levi, son of Darga, wouldn't be allowed to pay this money because it would, sure, it might not cause the burden of the community, but it certainly would still make it very lucrative for someone to steal someone else because they would think, oh, I'm always going to get 13,000 gold dinars when I take a hostage. Okay. So that's why this is our answer. However, it's not quite over yet. We have kind of a ping and pong going on here. So if we have obviously a ping saying, this is the reason why, we probably want a pong saying, this is the reason why. Now, remember, you also know that another way ping and pong can work is maybe if I know that this side is winning and I want this side to win, I don't necessarily have to show why this wins. I can just show why this doesn't win. And that's exactly what's going to happen here so we have our ping saying the reason why we do not make more for hostages is that we don't want to burden the community. And that's why this guy was allowed to pay, because he wasn't burdening the community. So now the Pong side has to give a reason for the other way, or a reason why this is wrong. I have to say, before I tell you what the Pong side says, I kind of find it a little bit lame. It's a little bit of a cop out, right? Because check out what he says. He says the Pong side says the following. Oh, Abaye says, you can't use this story as proof. Maybe the guy went against the wishes of the rabbis in Jewish law, meaning you only have part of the story. You might not have the rest of the story, where it might say the rabbis disagreed and really like excommunicated this guy after he did this act, or they were so upset with him that they never allowed him to pray in their synagogue anymore, like that. Like the Pong side is basically saying, don't use that as proof, because we don't know. You only gave us part of the story. We want to know the full story. Of course, the Pink side could come back and say, actually, I do know the full story, and this is what happened at the end. They threw a big feast for this guy or something like that. But for some reason, they don't. And for some reason, this is enough to say, okay, we're done. We're done trying to figure out which is the true reason. I'm not sure why they stop here, but they're kind of saying, I'm not 100% sure this is the reason. I'm not 100% sure that's the reason. But we get rid of that as a reason, and we kind of move on for some reason. Again, I don't know why. I wish there was a pretty ending and we knew exactly what was going on here. Maybe they never felt like there was actually definitive proof and both could actually work. Okay. So now we're moving on to the next part of our Talmud piece here, okay? And here we have, right, we just talked about this piece right here. Um, we may not redeem captives for more than they're worth, mipnei tikkun olam. And now we're going to look at the second part of our Mishnah, right? May not help captives escape because of tikkun olam. But Rav Gamliel says, no, that's not the reason. It's not because of tikkun olam. It's because of a takanat hashvuim. It's doing something, making it easier for the captives. And so the Talmud asks us, my beinaihu, what is the practical difference between the Mishnah that doesn't have a name connected to it? And by the way, I think that Eitan and Yona were at a Shavuot lesson with Rabbi Dan Levine this year, who told us that every time we see a Mishnah that doesn't have a name connected to it, we know that rabbi who spoke those words was a guy named Rabbi Meir. Okay, so for whatever that's worth, right? And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is basically saying, no, I don't believe that's why we don't do that. That's because of takanat hashvuim. And so the Gemara asks, what is the practical difference between them? Is there a practical difference between them, or are they actually saying the exact same thing? Now, of course, we want them to be having something different about them, because we don't want both people to be saying why they both do this. Why would then it would say Rav Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Meir and the Mishnah all agree that the reason we don't do this is because, but they have two different ideas, so there must be a difference. Okay, so what is the difference? And here is the answer they give. I'm going to give you the answer and see if you can figure it out. Okay, so the anonymous Mishnah, the Mishnah that doesn't have a name, which I just told you is probably Rabbi Meir, says we don't help a person who is captive escape because we want to give justice to everyone. Okay, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, no. We have to be worried about all of the shvuim, all of the captives. So to make it easier for the captives, we need to not allow any of them to escape. Okay, so let me try to kind of explain it again. So our anonymous mission is saying, do not let do not help people escape because of I'm looking at the entire world right now, not the captives themselves, but what would the world look like if it was easy, if people were helping captives escape? That might mean that it puts everyone in danger, that the next time there are captives, they're treated they're treated in a way that they are extra guarded, that they are put in extra, remote places, that where no one can find them in some way. And so basically, the anonymous mission is saying, for the sake of the future hostages that might be, we do not want to allow we can't help any escape right now. Raman Shimon Gamaliel is saying, I'm not worried about the future hostages. I'm worried about the present hostages and the hostages that are actually left around once this guy escapes. So if they help one person escape and there are 10 left, right? The hostages are going the people who are holding them are going to be worse to those hostages that are actually still there. And Rabban Shimon Gamliel says that's why we don't help them escape. And so the Talmud now asks, well, what is the difference between them? Is there any difference between them? And the answer they give is when there's only one captive. So what does that mean? How does that work when there's only one captive? What's the difference between them? Well, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, what am I worried about? I am worried about the moment when, if you're having someone escape, I'm worried about the people left behind. But if there only is one captive, there's nothing to worry about there because there's only one person left behind. So in the case, so normally we wouldn't help. We normally, if there were 10 people there, we would say, I don't help the captive escape because of because either of these reasons work. But when I have only one person there, the only reason why I shouldn't have them escape is because of I'm afraid of how they will guard future hostages, right? So if I help this one escape and if I find easy ways to do it, they're going to block up that escape route and make it even harder for the next group. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel would say, if there's only one there, help that person escape because we're not worried about what's going to happen to the people left over because there is no one left over, right? So that is kind of the halachical difference between them. In every amount, they would be really saying the same thing, but if there's only one person there, the normal mission would say you can't help him escape, but Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel would say yes, have him escape. So that this kind of brings us actually to the end of our piece of Talmud here. Like, I don't know if we get like if we can move away from this and have some kind of profound pieces of learning going on here, but kind of like large messages. Although I do think there is a large message that we have a sense, especially from the very first story, of the anguish and the pain and the difficulty when hostages are taken. But the Talmud is trying to actually take those emotions and think a little bit more clearly, a little bit more rational, and saying, we cannot think of hostages as single time situations. It's not like a hostage situation is a one and done type of thing, that we have to think about what we do now and what the ramifications of doing what we do now will either be for A, the hostages left behind, or B, the community, which has to kind of act as the redeemers of that person, or future people that are not yet, but actually might be hostages. So, in a sense, it says that when we have a situation, a big problem, a problem that we want to take very, very seriously, taking that problem very seriously means not just looking at the problem itself, but looking at the aftermath of what a solution will bring, looking at the societal effects of that solution as well, and kind of asking ourselves, justice isn't just justice for this moment, but there is a larger sense of justice as well that has to be taken into kind of account in that algorithm of what can we do for this person who is taken hostage. So, not great answers, but kind of very interesting answers for kind of some of the messiness of how you live a life and how you deal with that immediate rage of saying, I'm going to do anything I can do to get a hostage back because that is the worst thing that could ever be, right? And all my resources I'm going to put to bear, all my wrath I'm going to kind of let out in order to kind of get that hostage back. And all that being said, I hope that our talk about hostages kind of will allow us to kind of think very deeply about the 200 over 200 hostages that are being held in Gaza, and let us hope that they are speedily returned. Bimhera v'yameinu, and let us say Amen.